because at the time I don't think I did phrase it very well, was the idea that when we talk about God's presence being everywhere, we need to distinguish between what we mean here in terms of God coming temporally into his creation and taking on matter and flesh, which we affirm that he does, right?
Yes.
And then the other situation in which there is a meaningful sense you can say God is all-present, omnipresent, because of his omniscience and his omnipotent. His power and his knowledge being all complete is enough of a meaningful sense to say that he is present. And I think if Muslims are honest, they'd actually say yes. Like, there has to be a meaningful way in which someone is present. It's kind of like saying, if someone has all the CCTV cameras in the world and can interact in any single one at will, you would say there's a meaningful way that they're there. In the same way that if a father leaves his home, although he's left his home, it's still the home owner, so to speak, right?
Right.
So there's still a meaningful way in which he is there, even if he is not physically there.
Ali Dawah was saying something along the lines of they believe that God can see and hear everything, but God isn't here per se. That sounds a bit more like the CCTV idea. So God is elsewhere, and he can't meaningfully interact with us, but he's aware of all that's happening. And that is the portion that I don't agree with. Because when we talk about receiving the spirits, for example, that is us receiving or welcoming God into us. And so for that to be consistent, at least on the theological sense, there must be a way that God is, yes, aware and present in knowledge and sight and hearing, of everything that goes on earth, but also in some way can directly interact with us in a personal level, whilst also having the CCTV cameras everywhere. And that's the portion that they couldn't sort of get through.
Absolutely. I do agree with this. I think what they're going to try, and I think this is kind of what they were trying to do at the end. So they're saying, well, if you think there is a meaningful way that God is everywhere, then that must manifest itself in a physical way everywhere.
Which is when they were saying, if God is here, why can't I see him?
I know they're also trying to say like, he's in this tree, he's in here, and you can say, well, there is a meaningful sense in which he is there because through his attributes, it's impossible not to be. But in the other phrase, we aren't talking about a physical, scientific. And do you remember the young lady who was talking to you?
I shouldn't have talked to her. I realized I watched it back. She kind of derailed the conversation a bit. I shouldn't have like leaned in to speak to her. I should have told her like I'll come back to her later. But yes. She was. I didn't quite get what she was saying.
She was basically saying, if God is everywhere, then how do you describe the sort of space being filled? And I was sort of trying to think, what? And then I realized halfway through the conversation, she thinks that when we say God is everywhere, she thinks that there is actually some kind of matter being taken here. In other words, that God is actually physical everywhere.
So he's taking up space in space.
Yes, that's what they believe.
Was she Muslim?
That's what she thinks the Christian position is. And I was sort of like, no, we don't. God can take up flesh and matter.
Sure.
We all believe that, but we don't think that, like, if you examine the atom in this camera, you'll find somehow God's attributes are in the atom. No, that's not quite how we see it.
All right.
I think that's kind. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for her, I would have thought it was just them intentionally taking the wrong idea of things. But I actually think perhaps some Muslims do genuinely believe that, because I think maybe they talk to Hindus and they think the Hindu position is that there is something. I don't know. I need to investigate.
No.
That was just a little bit of clarity. But everything in that I think went amazingly well, and I think you did really, really well.
Thank you. I was just having a sort of like a conversation, and then it got like sidetracked by Ali Dawah, the Jewish dude David, who like I need to find him and give him a knuckle sandwich because that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But no, he's interesting, and then the Sheikh was there as well. So I was sort of trying to manage like 3 different conversations at once. I actually the funny thing about it is I'm very self-critical, believe it or not. And when watching it back, I thought of like 18 ways that I could have done better in that conversation. And essentially, I should have been a lot more stern with all of my declarations and like really like poking at their theology, because they have this idea, right, that like, there's God and there's his attributes. And God's attributes are not God, but they are somewhat additions to God in a way. So we believe in one God, they believe in one God as a if you know we're talking about a monad, like a singular, a singular unitary thing.
Yeah, with no compound anything.
Yes, and then there's additions to him that existence attributes, and because God is a monad, he can't be anything more than that. So when we talk about his mercy, his presence, his love, those are all like additions that aren't essentially intrinsic to God, but exist outside of God, which is problematic.
Yes, very.
In many ways, so that it is, can we not say meaningfully that God is love, for example? Or just God has a component of love to him.
Another thing I noticed as well during the discussion was they wanted, or at least they tried, or maybe it was a Sheikh or someone trying to say that mercy is an attribute. Now mercy to them is an attribute.
Okay.
Because it's one of the 99 names.
Okay.
But I would argue that actually mercy isn't an attribute.
It should be intrinsic, yeah.
Because I would say it's an outflowing of love, which is an attribute.
Right.
So it's sort of like an energy essence distinction, perhaps.
Yes.
How we kind of
which I need to read up on, but I've heard, I think in the comments somebody said something along the lines of essence energy is important here, and I was like, what? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, fine. The essence is the lack of a better term, the thing that is God. And the energies are then the actions.
Yeah, the way that.
Okay.
Creation is an energy.
Yeah.
I think I find that quite useful.
Okay.
For them, they can't have this meaningful discussion because
No.
one of the attributes is in creation. And
Yes.
So you have this weird.
Yes.
If you're going to say that the Quran is the word of Allah,
Yes.
the Kalam Allah, in every meaningful sense that it is, then you have a problem.
Oh, you're talking about one of the many
You
problems.
illustrate this very, very well. Especially when you were talking to David.
Okay.
And David was trying to summarize the Muslim belief, but he didn't understand the Muslim belief.
Yes.
And he started saying, yes, there is a word of Allah, but it's not like. He got really confused.
And I was a bit annoyed actually by that, because I mean I've never spoken to a rabbinical Jew before. Because I understand that yes, they hold to the Old Testament, but their interpretations of everything is completely different.
I saw your frustration when you're like, hey, you know this, you're a Jew.
You should know this. Yeah.
All these places.
Yeah, and then and then Colin did a good job of driving home the idea of God dwelling in the ark and in the temple and in the tent in the time of David. But I should have brought that up again and talked about those things, but David left, so it wasn't so poignant anymore just to discuss them. And it was funny when as proof that these guys do not read the Bible in any meaningful way, I showed Ali a picture of the ark, and I said, do you know what this is? It's like no. I was like, how do you claim to know Christianity is a lie, but you don't know the fundamentals of Christianity?
Also, I find it interesting that Islam doesn't give you any teaching on this. There's no reason to actually care in Islam.
This is actually something very interesting I was looking at. So, effectively, I haven't read the entirety of the Quran. I've read components of it, so I'll never claim to know the entire thing inside and out. But from what I have read, there's a consistency with the idea that in the time when the Quran was being recited in the 7th century, it was recited to people in markets and like gathering squares. But it was recited in a way where it assumed that the audience was familiar already with Abraham, with Isaac, with Joseph. So effectively, the Quran in the way that it's presented today is unnaturally incomplete, because in order to fully contextualize and understand the teachings of the Quran, you have to refer to text that comes before it, because the Quran provides no information whatsoever.
Yes, but it obviously assumes that there's some truth there.
Yes,
it's taking these ideas, it's developing these ideas, but it doesn't know what it's taking from in some ways. So can I give you an example of it?
No,
I
I have a couple as well that I find quite interesting.
Because this illustrates a serious problem.
Yes.
And this is why we have Muslims, Sunni Islam, that affirms both the Quran and the Sunnah. Because they cannot separate them.
Yes.
And the reason they cannot separate them is the moment you do, you have no idea what the Quran is.
Effectively.
You effectively can't explain it. There are just large parts that don't mean anything.
Yes. Because in one second you're talking about Jesus. Suddenly we're talking about Abraham. Wait, what happened to Jesus? Well, where'd he go?
Or there are things that are being referred to that doesn't tell you what they are.
Yes.
So you end up reading Surah 33 without any context. Man, you have no idea what's going on. You know that there's some allegations being made. You have no idea what they are.
Right.
But really good one to really illustrate this. Very short as well.
Okay.
It's Surah 105.
Okay.
The elephant.
The elephants.
I want you to read this for me, if you would like.
Okay, sure. The entire thing, or?
Yeah, it's very short.
Okay. Have you not seen, O prophet, how the Lord dealt with the army of the elephants? Oh, who? Hannibal Barker?
This is how it starts. Right?
Okay.
These are different translations. You can
Okay.
order, so that's the next
Okay.
one.
Did he not frustrate their schemes? For he sent against them a flock of birds that pelted them with stones of baked clay, leaving them like chewed up straw.
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's it? Right.
Yeah.
I promise you, there is nothing before or after that explains what that is. do you have any idea what that is? I have no idea.
Hannibal Barker. There's a what is it? Like a 4th century BC figure that went to war with Rome. There's that.
Well, there is actually an entire story that
Okay.
comes after that explains this.
Okay.
But without that story and without the hadiths that explain it,
Okay.
and the sunnahs to effect, you
Right.
have no idea.
Yes.
And so the Quran is always stuck in this position
Yes.
where it's a clear book, but it's not clear.
Yes.
It has things that no one understands, and that's why they have to take Muhammad and his supposed sayings
Yes.
as revelation.
Additionally, it was written by Allah before time began. In some schools of thoughts, some believe it's created, some believe it's uncreated. Let's go with the uncreated people, for example.
I believe the uncreated is Sunni, well, the mainstream Orthodox position.
Okay.
I think some Ash'aris may not hold to it.
Yep,
but
yeah,
most,
yeah.
Most do. Atharis will, anyway. Atharis. I'm still trying to pronounce that word.
Yeah, Faris. Assuming this position is true, did Allah not have enough time before creation to figure out the best way to translate these messages over to people without assuming that the absolute ineptitude of detail in the Quran would be enough to have people come to any meaningful conclusions?
Yeah.
You'd think.
Yeah, you would think so.
Or are they getting it wrong and Allah actually does want them to go and read the Torah and the Injil to further
That would make more
contextualize?
sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Are you familiar with a very popular 20th century Muslim apologist called Ahmadiyat?
Yes, yeah.
He's dead now, but his son tells Muslims to read the Bible so that they can understand the enemy. Yeah.
I mean, at least that's a good thing.
And
I
then
want to read the Bible.
the first time I came here, I was talking to a Muslim about the necessity of reading the Bible to somewhat understand what's in the Quran. And then Mansour came over, and the guy asked Mansour if he should read the Bible, and Mansour said he wouldn't recommend it. Because if they read it, then suddenly the Quran is completely thrown into question. Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Effectively.
It's a very simple way of knowing that the Quran is false and that Islam is false.
Effectively, by their fruits you shall know them.
Just going back to what you were saying in the debate,
Sure.
when we were talking about the presence of God, right?
Yes.
When we want to know whether or not in these accounts, would it have been known to the people that Moses, for example, was the prophet?
Right.
Well, there was actual signs given to the people that he was.
Yes.
When we look at the person of Jesus,
Yes.
at his baptism, there was a sign
Given to the people who were there
son,
that he
this is
was.
my Lord, peace.
Yes.
But then you look at Muhammad, as far as I'm aware, there isn't any.
According to the Quran,
went,
no.
Muhammad went to the Hira cave.
Right.
In private,
Yes.
had an experience with Jibreel.
Yes.
He was choked repeatedly.
Yes.
He came out now reciting something. Hey, Mansour. He had this experience.
Hey, Mansour.
And then, with that experience, he told others about it, and he had to be convinced of its own validity.
Right.
And then went on to talk about it. But there's never anywhere where anyone sees, oh, I saw Jibreel, I saw an angel, or I saw Allah, I saw anything like that descend upon Muhammad and was convinced of his prophet.
Right.
At least not in the Quran, anyway.
Yeah. And I think later in the Hadith, then you start getting things like, I think you brought this up with Siraj, the idea that there are no miracles, and then he pointed to 54. Now the hour has come, and the moon has been cast asunder. But it doesn't say, first of all, what's the hour, and who did this?
Well, first of all, that language, and I try to explain this in the debate very quickly. In the hour, or at the hour, that's talk of what we would mostly consider to be the day.
The end times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what most scholars think it is.
Yeah.
Most scholars don't accept the mainstream Muslim perspective because that phrase in the beginning is very indicative that it is.
Yes.
Second of all, it never mentions Muhammad.
Yes.
There is no name to Muhammad given here.
Yeah.
So it's a very big stretch to then take these stories that come hundreds of years later that try and reconcile this because otherwise, what is it about? No one knows what it's about otherwise.
Yes.
Something
But then,
about
For some reason, within Islam, and I don't think we have this in sort of like hardcore like Christian theology, where you can question, but when it gets too tricky, stop. It's like a red line.
There is, absolutely.
So like if something doesn't make sense, either historically or like I don't know, realistically, it's just God knows. And I actually I think it's Alua Alam or something like Allahu Alam or something. Yeah, or God knows. Like leave it alone. And I do think that they need to be more willing to push that red line and actually come to a conclusion as to whether or not they're simply believing blindly the way they claim that Christians do, or do they actually have a rational reason to believe in what they believe in.
Yeah, I think that's I really hope they do that. I think what we're seeing now within Muslim groups is
it's just a rule. Yeah, he's doing his thing.
I was wondering if he was engaging with anyone else. I might want to join in with it.
Oh, absolutely.
So what Muslims are doing now, I find, when I look online, I look at different communities and see what they're talking about. You basically have the Salafi Muslims, those who are the Hanbali followers, the ones who are going straight down. Nope, you follow the Hadith, you follow the Quran, you follow the Sunnah, no questions asked. And then you have those that are like, whoa, if we do that, we end up embracing some absolute nonsense.
Right.
And we cannot affirm it.
Right.
We end up saying that a 6-year-old has the ability to give consent.
By the way, Mansour once said, and I saw this in the video, because it was hotter back then, people developed faster.
Is that why 6-year-olds in Spain are notoriously adult?
Yes. As a person who spent 5 years in a hot country, for some reason, when I came here, I was the exact same size as every other kid who was here. So I guess maybe I needed like a further 5. Maybe that's why Nigerians are 10 foot tall, because they live in the sunlight and they grow like plants. So I heard Mansour say that once, and that was very interesting.
One day they change it to be like, there's something special about the sand in Mecca, in Hijaz, something special about it.
Yes.
It wouldn't surprise me if they did. I think they don't have any other answers for it. And I think
unfortunately not,
you saw the scraping of the barrel.
Yes. And I think another issue is the reluctance to criticize Muhammad, I think, is sort of like conflated with the idea that by criticizing him, they are somehow either insulting him or rejecting him as a prophet. And this is actually a very interesting point. I saw some other Muslims debate this like a while ago. They had this view that if you become a prophet, then suddenly you become the most exemplary form of man there is to walk the face of the earth. But when we look at the Old Testament in particular, we can see that you can be a prophet, but also still be messed up as a human being, still err, make mistakes, make errors. But for some reason, that idea is lost on them.
Exactly that.
So for example, we can talk about David, we can talk about Moses. There are parts where they erred and went against God. And as Christians, we can see those and understand that in that instance, they did the wrong thing. They made a mistake, they sinned. We should not replicate those things. But for them, that concept is completely void, which is why you can bring up things like the marriage to a 6-year-old, the owning of slaves and black slaves, having sex with slaves, and all these things. And for some reason, because of the fundamental belief that as a prophet, you are sinless and faultless, those things can suddenly slide. When if anyone else did them, they'd be horrible. Because I see no difference between the actions of Muhammad when he was alive, according to at least the hadith, and the actions of Genghis Khan. There are no differences.
Yeah. So it's a really good way of looking at it. There are so many similarities that no one seriously who looks for a moral example, and that's what the Quran calls him in Surah 33, ayah 21. He is a great example to the Ummah.
Right.
There are other verses in the Quran that say that once a matter has been dealt with by like your Lord or Allah and Muhammad, you don't question it. And that's part of where that whole problem comes
I see.
in. You can't critique him because then you're disobeying the Quran. If you disobey the Quran, you're not a Muslim.
I see.
So,
Well.
So how do you get out of it? Well, you have to. And I think what they did is a very clever switcheroo. I think what they did at some point is they said, wait. We will say that all prophets are sinless, despite the fact you won't find support for this in the Quran. The Quran clearly says Muhammad sinned. We are going to have that view as part of the deen. And then when anyone challenges Muhammad, we'll say, well, who are you to talk about Muhammad? You've thrown all your prophets into the bus because you say they were sinned.
Right.
So it's a clever, but at least we're doing a nice thing. Okay. Even if it's not true.
I see.
And I want to actually show very quickly this, because it's important to keep this in mind.
Okay.
So I have a list here of all, where is it? I had it somewhere. Let me go back to the top. There we go. Defaming prophets. Okay, so there are hadith where they defame prophets. They make embarrassing and bizarre cases about prophets.
Okay.
So you'll often hear things like someone was seen naked, right?
Okay.
I can't remember where it was in the Bible now. But there's a story of someone being exposed naked.
There's a bunch of them. There's Noah. There's I don't know if you talked about. No, Lot wasn't naked. There's Noah. There's David when he was dancing. When they were bringing the ark into Jerusalem and his garments fell off of him. Is it Ezekiel or Isaiah? He was made to wander around naked for a number of years.
Yes.
Yeah, there's things like that essentially.
Isaiah,
okay.
But anyway, if we look at some of these, you can kind of illustrate the issue that they'll have. So, do you want to read it?
Which one?
This one.
Okay, so Allah's messenger said, the prophet Solomon once said, "Tonight I will sleep with 90 women, each of whom will bring forth a would-be cavalier who will fight in Allah's cause." On this, his companions said to him, "Say Allah willing." But he did not say Allah willing. Solomon then slept with all the women, but none of them became pregnant. But one woman, who later delivered a half man. Okay, but by him in whose hands Muhammad's soul is. If he, Solomon, had said Allah willing, all his wives would have brought forth boys, and they would have fought in Allah's cause as cavaliers. A half man meaning a centaur.
I think they're trying to say a deformed man.
A deformed man.
Yeah, I think that's what they're getting at. But the issue is that Solomon supposedly didn't say Inshallah. He didn't say Allah willing. And so when he slept with all these concubines, he didn't have
any kids.
Yeah.
I have heard something else. I don't think it's Sahih grade, but it's something along the lines of if you're sleeping with a woman and you don't say Bismillah before you ejaculate, then potentially the shaitan can wrap himself around your penis and ejaculate in your wife or girlfriend or mistress with you. But it's not Sahih grade, I think. So, but it's funny to hear it anyway. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I genuinely feel as though arguing with Muslims is, at least the very hardcore ones, is akin to arguing with a flat earther. Yeah. Because there's nothing that you can bring to them that on a face-to-face instance will change them. But I think having these conversations with them is good. We are exposing and inquiring more into what Islam actually is. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the decades to come, Islam starts being viewed more as mythology than anything else.
Well, I think this is the other side of the coin. You have the Salafists that are doubling down, but those who are saying, look, we can't affirm the Sunnah.
Okay.
We can't do it. Why can't we do it? Because it is nonsense. It says bad things about prophets, says bad things about Muhammad. The stories of Muhammad being naked in here as well.
Right.
You have all these issues. We have to reject it. It also contradicts with narratives.
Okay.
There are hadith that contradict with historical claims made about other things, and it becomes a mess.
Yeah. Bob was talking about the Heracles claim that apparently he considered becoming a Muslim, but there's no evidence to suggest that he actually met a Muslim. Yeah.
You end up with this one, and Muslims are aware of this.
Yes.
There are Muslims more on the Hanafi side, or
the Hanafis. Hanafis are more.
And they tend
sensible.
to be like, look, we're not dumb.
Yeah.
We can't say Allah is on his throne and in the lowest heaven, which is in creation, and also say it's not in creation. None of that makes sense. But I think the more we talk about it and the more that we show these are massive contradictions. I mean, I've seen Muslims openly tell other Muslims, and these are da'is, and they'll say, look, don't think about it. Don't ask about it.
Yes, that's that red line.
It's that red line. You're coming up to the red line again. But we have no such qualm.
No.
Our religion is a rational religion. God is a God of law, of truth, and that is reflected in our beliefs.
Yes.
We need to show that with Islam. It's not with them. Jump out.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine with me. Yeah, that's everything. Okay?
Come in, Jesus.